Today, we're going to get personal. We're going to look inside the soul of a man who was literally at war with his own divine calling. This is Jeremiah's confession, coming to us from the late 7th century BC, and it is, without a doubt, one of the most raw and brutally honest things you'll ever read. So, let's dive in.
So let's frame this whole thing with one simple but really tough question. What would you do if the one thing you were born to do was also the source of your deepest, most constant suffering? That conflict right there, that's the beating heart of what we're about to explore.
So, the passage opens, and it's not with some pious prayer. No, it opens with what sounds like a straight-up accusation against God himself. Jeremiah feels completely overpowered, maybe even betrayed, by the very mission he was given.
Okay, let's really zoom in on the words here in verse 7. When Jeremiah says God has deceived him, the original Hebrew word is much more about being persuaded, compelled, or just overpowered. He isn't saying, God, you tricked me. He's saying, God, your call was so strong, so irresistible, that my own will was completely conquered by it.
And what was the result of giving in to this divine calling? Was it honor, respect? Nope. It was constant, daily humiliation. His obedience turned him into an outcast, a joke among the very people he was trying to save.
So why? Why was he being mocked? Well, verse 8 tells us exactly why. His message was not comforting. Every time he opened his mouth, he was shouting warnings of violence and spoil. We're talking invasion, destruction, the whole 9 yards. The word of God itself became the very reason for his public shaming.
And you have to understand, these weren't just abstract threats he was throwing around. This timeline shows us why it was so real. Just a few years earlier, in 605 BC, the Babylonian Empire had absolutely crushed Egypt. They were the new superpower on the block. So Jeremiah's message of violence and spoil was pointing directly at this massive, terrifying, and very real threat right on their doorstep.
Okay, so this constant rejection is pushing Jeremiah to his absolute breaking point. And now we get to the core of his internal battle. This struggle with a message he can't stand to speak anymore, but also finds impossible to keep inside.
So faced with all this hostility, Jeremiah makes a very, very human decision in verse 9. He quits. He just says, that's it, I'm done. For my own sanity, for my own survival, I'm just going to stop talking about God, period.
But he can't do it. And this right here, this is the heart of the whole passage. The Word of God isn't just an idea to him. It's a physical force. It's like a burning fire shut up in my bones. He literally says he's exhausted just from trying to hold it back. For him, silence just isn't an option.
Now, the pressure wasn't only coming from the inside. In verse 10, we see the hostility from others turning into an active plot against him. He hears the whispers, the slander, fear on every side. And that phrase in Hebrew, it's Magor Misabib, the exact name he had given to the man who tortured him. That terror had now completely surrounded him. And who was in on this conspiracy? It wasn't just his enemies. The text says his familiars, his trusted friends, his inner circle. They were watching him, just waiting for him to slip up, hoping they could trap him so they could finally get their revenge for his unpopular message. Talk about betrayal.
And just when you think he's hit absolute rock bottom, the text just pivots on a dime. I mean, the tone shifts from this deep, dark complaint to an incredible, defiant declaration of faith.
I mean, listen to this. In verse 11, all that fear just seems to vanish. Jeremiah declares that God is with him, not as some gentle comforter, but as a mighty, terrible one, a terrifying warrior. He's suddenly filled with this total confidence that his enemies are going to fail and face everlasting shame.
He then appeals to God as the only one who can truly see what's going on, the one who sees the reins and the heart. This is a classic Hebrew way of talking about the deepest parts of a person, your hidden motives, your real emotions. Jeremiah is basically handing his case over to the only one who knows he's telling the truth.
And this builds to what is maybe the most astonishing moment in the whole chapter. In verse 13, his lament just erupts into a command, "Sing unto the Lord." Now here's the key. He's celebrating his deliverance before anything has actually changed. It's this radical act of faith in a future he can't yet see.
But hold on, because this emotional roller coaster is not over, not by a long shot. The passage takes one last whiplash-inducing turn, plunging from that incredible high of praise right back down into the absolute depths of despair.
Wow. Verse 14 just lands like a punch to the gut. It sounds a lot like the lament of Job, right? Jeremiah curses the very day he was born. Now, this is crucial. He's not cursing God. He's cursing his own existence, a life that has just become an endless cycle of unbearable pain.
He just keeps going. In verse 15, even cursing the man who brought the happy news of his birth to his father. He's looking back at what should have been a moment of pure joy and seeing it now as just a tragic mistake, the start of all his sorrow.
In verse 17, he says he wishes his life had just ended before it even really began, and we need to see this for what it is. It's not about him wanting to end his life now. It's an expression of profound, existential grief. It's a raw, honest wish to escape a life defined by so much suffering.
And the whole confession just ends. It ends on this haunting, unanswered question from verse 18. Why? Why was I even born just to see labor and sorrow and to have my days consumed with shame? The text gives us no neat little bow, no easy answer. It just leaves that tension between incredible faith and incredible pain hanging in the air.
So, what do we take away from all this? I think it's a brutally honest portrait of what a life of faith can actually look like. It shows us that having deep, authentic belief doesn't make the anguish go away. Jeremiah's story forces us to grapple with a really difficult truth, that sometimes faith and profound suffering aren't opposites. They just have to coexist.
When you boil it all down, this is the story of a man caught in an impossible position, between the crushing cost of his calling and a divine message that he could not contain, a fire in his bones that simply would not go out.